We're on the air. We are here, and it's Friday, which always adds an added element of excitement. You feel it in the air. I'm super happy to be here. Super happy you're here. It's Friday, February 23rd, 2024, and it's here. The day's here. We've been talking about this for a long time. Ace Frehley's new album, 10,000 Volts, has dropped. You can check it out. I've listened to it, not super in depth, scanned through it, rolled through it. There's good news and bad news. Do you want the bad news first or the good? The bad news is it's Ace singing. Okay. Ace is the singer. It is what it is. The good news is the riffage is considerable. So I like it. I like it, and I'll be giving it a more a deeper dive throughout the day. Probably will post a review about it, but again, riffage not to be trifled with. It sounds good. The production sounds good. The guitars sound good, but it is Ace singing. So we all know kind of what that means. But don't let that deter you from a great rock and roll album. Because like I said, I like what I'm hearing. I'm picking up what he's laying down. Speaking of Ace, one of the songs on the new album, he always, I think on every album he's done, he has a cover, at least one cover. He did a whole album of covers, but he's always got a few covers. He's covered songs by ELO, by the Steve Miller Band, his hit from the solo album back in, was that 78 or 79? Whenever they did the solo albums, Kiss or Ace is by far the best of the Kiss solo albums. New York Groove was actually a cover. I don't know that a lot of folks are aware of that. Marlon checking in again today. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your support. But one of the covers he got from a weird place. And here's the thing about covers. If you pick obscure covers, people don't know they're covers, right? And that happens a lot. Greg at the Mean Machine. Hi, buddy. Thanks for tuning in. He says, good morning, Jeremy. Happy Friday. It is a happy Friday for sure. Thank you for joining. But the cover tune on this album, he got from the closing credits of that movie, The Transporter. Remember? Jason Statham, that movie back in like 2002. I think I watched it on an airplane. And he got that, he wanted to cover that song. And it's a song called Life of a Stranger. It was just played over the closing credits. And he said that song has always been rattling around in his brain. And he wanted to cover it, but he wasn't sure he could sing it. But they did it, and it's pretty cool. I don't want to call it a ballad. But it is. It's a mid-tempo. It's dramatic. It's got a cool guitar intro at the beginning, and it's dramatic. And you can go on Ultimate Classic Rock and you can actually play Ace's version and then hear the original version. This is from an artist named Nadia. And they're both cool. I mean, the original is cool. It was definitely not a rock song. It's kind of an electronic European type thing. And Ace made it his own, added some riffage, and it's kind of cool. But that's where that one cover tune came up with. Greg says he just played Back in the New York Groove on the Mean Machine. That's awesome. And Jay also chiming in. Jay's got the Judas Priest Rock-a-Rolla picture for his avatar here. He says, have a killer weekend, Jeremy. You do the same. Thank you so much for checking in. So anyways, this is one of the tunes you can check out on the new Ace album, 10,000 Volts. I like it so far. What I've heard so far, I like. A Tom Petty tribute album is in the works. It's called Petty Country. And you probably know where this is going, right? Scheduled to be shipped on May 31st. Among the contributors, Willie Nelson, Dolly Parton, Chris Stapleton, Marty Stewart, Margot Price, a bunch more. Two former Heartbreakers, Mike Campbell and Benmont Tench, who's the keyboard player. They will be on the album as well. Dierks Bentley. My wife is a bigger country fan than I have, but I've seen a few country shows. I saw Dierks Bentley a few years ago, and actually it was a really good show. He's doing a cover of American Girl. And Dierks comments, quote, Petty's Southern roots shine through across his songwriting and storytelling. He might not have ever been considered as country, but you can't go into a bar in Nashville without hearing this song. It's one of the greatest songs in a life's work of great American songs. That, of course, referring to the song American Girl. And by the way, Nashville has become kind of the rock and roll center of the U.S. I don't know if you're aware of this. So many, especially of the classic rock artists that we know and love, they've relocated to the Nashville area. There are tons of musicians, tons of studios, right? I don't want to get in trouble when I say this. People are fleeing California in droves, right? And much of that music entertainment talent has relocated to Nashville. An interesting story. This is way back in the 80s. Jeff Beck tells a story. Jeff Beck, some people consider the greatest guitarist ever. He was working on an album in Nashville, and he was in the studio. And, they laid down their stuff and they were about to go home. And he said the guy cleaning up, the janitor, asked Jeff if he could play one of his guitars. And Jeff said, sure, it's still hooked up. So this janitor picks it up. And Jeff said he was blown away. He's like, I almost wanted to quit playing because the janitor in Nashville was unbelievable. So just saying, the level of musicianship in Nashville is off the charts. And so we think of Nashville as a country town, but to be honest, it's, a lot of rock and roll comes pumping out of Nashville. Marlon asked, do your own songs. Okay. I think he's saying FCOL. I think. Are you saying country guys need to do their own songs and not do Tom Petty's? I don't know. That's what you're saying. Come on, Marlon. That's not nice. I don't know. It will be interesting to hear. I want to hear what song Dolly Parton does on a Tom Petty album. So that'll be interesting. During an appearance on this past Wednesday's episode of SiriusXM's Trunk Nation with Eddie Trunk, Zakk Wylde spoke about the possibility of the reformed lineup of Pantera. Now, remember, last year, maybe it's been a year and a half ago, they did a show. Zakk teamed up with the remaining members of Pantera, and they toured as Pantera to I don't want to say mixed reviews, to mixed emotions. Some people are purists, right? If it's not all the original people, they don't want anything to do with it. They think it's not legit, whatever. Knowing what I know about Zakk Wylde, I'm sure it was a great show. And so part of us just believe, hey, if you're a Pantera fan, it's Pantera music being played live by a great band. Why wouldn't you like it? Right? So there, he wasn't it wasn't necessarily received well by everyone that Zakk teamed up with the remaining members and they were touring as Pantera. But he says he's open to doing music with Pantera. He just says we'd want to call it something else. Oh, Marlon was referring to Ace doing covers. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. So Ace always he mostly does originals, but he always squeezes a few covers in there. So, and the FCOL. I'm not hip. I'm not hip to this lingo, Marlon. The FCOL that you typed means for crying out loud. I learned something new that I can use with my kids now. Okay, that's awesome. Jay chimes in. He bailed from California to Post Falls, Idaho 30 years ago. Post Falls just down the road from me. It's about 30 miles away. Great. Thanks, Jay. Here's a quote from Zach. Pressed about whether he would want to do it under an altered name rather than calling it Pantera, Wild said, quote, yeah, if that was ever a bridge we crossed, we'd have to wait until we get there. But right now, it's just the four of us celebrating what the fellas from the classic lineup created. And, you know, the producer, Sterling Winfeld, who produced Pantera, he said, he was asked about the possibility of the reformed Pantera recording new music. Quote, it's not unheard of. It's not blasphemous. I will say that it is entirely plausible. It is entirely possible. But at this point in time, I don't know that anybody's looking that far down the road. They've got a world tour to tackle, man, for the next 2 years. And they're going to be busy doing that. Now, could it happen? Yes. Asked if he would be cool with Brown, Anselmo, Wild, and Benante making new music together, Sterling said, quote, it depends, man. Again, it has to be done right, like this whole thing. The whole tour that's happening has to be done properly. And I don't really feel comfortable if it were to happen. I would not feel comfortable calling it Pantera. So kind of the same thing Zach said. I don't think that would be classy. I'll put it that way. And I'll just leave it at that for now. But this lineup could make some very badass music. And the music is all that matters. Absolutely. All right. Let's see. In a new interview with WNST and Baltimore Positive founder Nestor Aparico, Triumph guitarist, vocalist Rick Emmett was asked if he can foresee himself ever going back on the road again. And he responded, I am a guy that wrote a song that said never say never. And I do find it dangerous to take a really big paintbrush and paint brush strokes. But I should tell you, I've been struggling with some arthritis in my hands, and that's changing things. I don't know how much it will. And here's the point of the story. He continued, quote, I've gone through a sort of cancer treatment. Now I'm sort of trying to deal with this advent of rheumatoid arthritis, and I don't know how much it's going to knock a hole in my ability to play. So certainly going out on the road and traveling and hotels and airports, that does seem like a grind to me. And I've got to admit it, my wife has been patiently sitting around for decades waiting for, hey, she's going to go on a safari. She's going to like Kenya. She's going to like Kenya, Nairobi this year. I'm not going with her. That's not my idea of fun. But he also revealed that he's just completed radiation treatment for prostate cancer. He says, quote, for you gentlemen out there north of age 45 and 50, that's me and probably some of us listening, right? Please do yourself a favor and get checked. If you catch it early, there's an excellent chance it can be treated, and treatment doesn't always have to mean surgery or chemotherapy either. Consider this a PSA to get your PSA checked. Ha! Clever. All right. So good news to hear. It sounds like he's doing well. And guys, and I literally mean guys, males, if you're over 45, you need to, and we're notorious for not wanting to go to the doctor. I get it. I'm one of those, right? But you got to do it. You got to be screened. You got to get checked because absolutely no one wants to get cancer. But from what I've heard, if you're going to get cancer, prostate cancer is one that can be treated more easily than other cancers if you catch it early. But the key is catching it early. Okay. The key is catching it early. I'm trying for the update not to become a healthcare medical update every day. But these bands we listen to, they're all getting older. So much of the time, we hear more and more news about health related things. It is what it is, right? Hey, let's share an email here. Hey, Jeremy, I'm liking these daily updates. Hope you keep them up. By the way, this is from Lauren. Lauren was one of our early supporters of the podcast. So it's been a few years now that Lauren has been a supporter. So I really want to say thanks to Lauren for that and all of the support. I'm liking these daily updates. Hope you keep them up. On Sabbath, Ozzy Dio. Remember, this was in response to an email. I said I didn't think it was controversial, but I said I thought Ozzy's two first solo albums, Blizzard and Diary, were better than anything Sabbath had ever done. But then I also said that the two Dio Sabbath albums, there were actually three, Dehumanizer to me is not on the same level as Back in Black and Mob Rules. But I said Back in Black and Mob Rules were better than any Ozzy album that came out after Diary. That's what I said. And I was kind of taken to task on that. So this is what Lauren is talking about. On Sabbath, Ozzy Dio, I'm not a huge fan of Ozzy's solo career. Of course, being a professional guitarist, and Lauren teaches guitar lessons, plays, is a working musician. I appreciate Randy and Jake. The high point of that entire Ozzy package for me is Master of Reality. Okay, that's a classic Sabbath album. I love that album, and Geezer's bass playing has always struck a note with me. The man is awesome. The debut Sabbath album is pretty cool too, when I'm in the mood for it. Iommi is the riff master and inspired so many. I gave Blizzard and Madman a listen last year, both great albums, but I didn't need to hear them a second time. I'll never tire of Masters of Reality, though. Always looking forward to listening, Lauren. Lauren, thanks so much for checking in. Geezer is one of my favorite bassists. You listen to Geezer, very melodic. His sense of melody as a bassist is really cool. I mean, I think he's an awesome. I think, I could be wrong, I think Geezer started out as a guitarist. This is my theory. I think guys that start, and I don't mean just play, I think guys that are fairly accomplished guitarists who transition to bass play in a different style than guys that just start out on bass. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I do think there's a difference. I'm a little biased because I started out on guitar. And the other part of that is guitarists think, oh, bass playing's easy. It's just one note, right? And so every guitarist thinks he's a bass player. Yeah, I can play bass, no problem. Throw me that bass, I can play. I mean, it's only one note at a time, 4 strings instead. It's way easier. It's not, I mean, it's being a guitarist does not make you a bassist. But I think if you start out on guitar and then become a bassist and that becomes your instrument of choice, I do think that tends to influence the way you play the bass. Maybe you are more, I don't know. I'm thinking through this as I'm saying it. But I think you tell a difference when guys have a foundation in guitar playing before they start playing bass. And again, I'm not saying one's better or I don't know what I'm saying. Okay. Now I wish I hadn't even brought it up. Okay. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to the update today. Shoot me an email, classicguitarrock@mail.com, classicguitarrock@mail.com. I'd love to hear from you. You have a great weekend. Live long and prosper. We'll